Niskina, let's this run. French Open champion, so close to the baseline. The footwork is just great. By letting this go without the slow motion, the more you look at it, the more you understand. Your eye improves. Granted, she faces forward a little bit on the serve. Granted, she goes back a little bit too far. So tennis players are under the microscope. They get criticized. But look at the feet, circular swings. She faces forward a little bit, head shifts. But what a great player. Great footwork, circular swings. Rafael Nadal. Obviously needs no introduction. Arm straight, power line. His backhand has improved so much. Just the focus. You can tell a lot by a competitor's eyes. But look at the racket on edge, closes the racket face, lifts, relaxes from the elbows. You see so much athleticism, obviously, with such a great athlete. But what happens is people can't make the connection. They see how we go through introducing fundamentals to young players. But look at the racket. Look at the grips. So you see that athletic balance at the end. But granted, they play at such a high speed. But when it really comes down to the shape of the swing, the grips, just the basics, they're all there. David Nalbandian, rackets up high. Hits the racket below the ball. Hits way out away from his body. Regroups, split steps. Again, look how the elbow's raised, uses the left hand, rackets up high, racket face is closed. Off the front foot. Heads down, relaxes the swing from the elbow. So on that last forehand, there was a segment where it looks like he's hitting the ball off a stationary position, off a cone. This is a semi-open stance, way out away from the body. Now, Bandian's forehand one more time. So pros don't always hit with an open stance. If they have time to drive the ball off their front foot, so many of them do, time after time. But that's the three-point landing right there. It's made the step. The racket's down, the body's down, the foot's out. Way below the ball. With all the players, it's amazing, the great players, how far they hit the ball away from their body. And it's going to take great footwork to do that. Petrova, obviously a world-class tennis player, but she's waiting to return serve with a semi-western grip. The racket's not centered. The racket's not high. So she doesn't have the system where she can steal the ace. She doesn't have the system where, off a real weak serve, she can just run forward and play a conventional approach shot. Let's let it run. So I would say that her grip doesn't match her size. In other words, she's not wired to be the best player by just being a retriever from the baseline. She should have been taught a system where she can go forward. That contact point gets up too high. She pulls off the hitting zone too soon. So TNT, talent and technique. Obviously she has great talent, but certainly think that she could improve her technique. Let's look at her return serve another time. What I'm showing you is not opinion. It's a fact the way she waits. But an opinion of mine would be that she's been doing it for a long time. There's no substitute for a good beginning. Remember, you want to begin with the end in mind. So the system that she was taught as far as returning serve has some drawbacks. Now, body's the leader. She pulls open with that front shoulder. Now, by the time she's done, if you were to push her right now, she would run to the side court. So it takes about 0.8 of a second for her to get back in a centered position. where she has center of gravity. She's in a position to run forward. And that 0.8 of a second equates into about 8 feet going forward. So it's going to make it more difficult for her to get to the net. So the way she waits, with the grip she uses, also the way she recovers, will make it more difficult for her to get to the net. Sam Querrey. Juniors, I would tell you to watch Sam Querrey. Try to copy how relaxed he is. Try to copy his sense of enjoyment. On the backhand, good step out, long hitting zone. His weakest shot would be his backhand volley. And with his side, when you watch him play, you can see he doesn't really value volleying position, doesn't really trust his volley and his overhead. But great serve, forehand, backhand, very, very effective. Great tennis player. Andy Roddick, top American for over 5 years. Short period of time where James Blake was ranked ahead of him, but a very short period of time. I have a tape of his mom, Blanche, saying that he had a pitiful serve when he was a young player. So we'll look at it. He had a regressed palm up. But a lot of positives still. Hands are together, has a stance. So right here, he fans the racket. Elbow comes way into his body. So he has a regressed palm up. So then he ends up facing forward. Both feet from his nose to his toes, he's facing forward. And the story is he went out in frustration and discovered closing the racket face, having the racket in the salute position on his own. And granted, he has an abbreviated swing, but keep in mind the speed of the backswing has nothing to do with the power supply. So for Andy, like anyone, to make the change, he needed to practice. He needed a repetition because it's brain memory. Starts with the racket up high. Looks good as far as what he's doing with his body, but the palm turns up. Palm up equals elbow down. And if he didn't change his mechanics, I don't think he would be who we know him to be. And he certainly would be more prone to injury. Now let's look at a changed serve. Okay, remember, the better the player, the more they're criticized. But Andy Roddick, great player. Now you can see the short backswing, but notice the difference. The palm is down. Way, way out in front. Now that left arm flying behind him, that's not what he initially does, but that's what young players are going to see with a naked, untrained eye. That left arm will stay up as a reactive break, but once the player hits the ball, they need to propel themselves forward. So to bring the right hip through, they bring the left elbow back, but the palm is down. I think it's great for players to find out about change. So many examples of great champions that made changes in their game along the way. Murat Safin. Arguably, him and his sister have surpassed Nancy and Cliff Ritchie as the best brother-sister in the history of the game. Either way, they're way up there, and they're both great players. Very good to see the split step. Let's watch his forehand. Racket's up high, arms bent, racket faces closed, gets way below the ball. He does pull out too much with that left shoulder, loses his center of gravity, makes it a little more difficult for him to get to the net. He can really just swing up from one hinge. He can play with his arm from the shoulder where he's not wristy or not pulling his elbow horizontally across his body. He's playing upper arm. He's not playing lower arm. He's swinging with his arm from his shoulder.